Hi, my name is Keith Alsheimer, and I am the head of marketing for Unravel Data. And I'm here today with Chris Santiago, our vice president of solutions engineering, to introduce you to Unravel Data and our product platform. I wanted to just start with sharing with you what we view our purpose is at Unravel, and that's to really help data teams deliver on the promise of data. And as we all know, that promise is amazing innovation. We see the kind of impact that data is having on our world around us every day in the form of much reduced timelines to develop vaccines like were developed for COVID, impacting agriculture worldwide to improve the availability of food, and helping to understand and combat complex things like climate change. We're about data teams because data teams are the real heroes, the ones who wake up every day and deal with all of the challenges associated with mining and managing and delivering that data effectively to actually solve those problems that drive that innovation. And we feel that's really important because when we talk to data teams today, what we see is they're really struggling and they're getting bogged down and feeling overwhelmed. So if you think about the reasons for that, in addition to the staffing problem, there's also a kind of five-way crossfire where the volume of data being processed is massive and getting bigger and bigger every day. The criticality of the jobs that are needed because of their strategic nature continues to go higher and higher. The speed at which companies need their data teams to operate to deliver on those data applications is faster and faster and faster. And yet the modern data stack is super complex, far more complex than other software data stacks. And that complexity is getting more and more every day. And as companies are shifting their data landscapes to the cloud, the costs to deliver on the data pipeline and data applications becomes more and more and harder to manage effectively. So DataOps observability, in essence, enables data teams to do the same kind of things that DevOps has done for software development teams, which is to get out of the silos, be more interoperable, be able to deliver on the functions of the DataOps teams faster with greater agility. And Unravel is fundamentally designed from the ground up for data teams. I said in the very beginning that the Unravel purpose really is to empower and enable data teams to be more successful, spend more of their time solving core problems instead of firefighting and doing very manual, toilsome tasks. And so Unravel really is a fundamental DataOps observability platform. And our goal is to continue to expand our capabilities over time to really serve the entire end-to-end spectrum of needs for data teams. So at Unravel, we believe that the more we can help data teams spend less time firefighting and more time solving the real problems that are needed to bring innovation to life, we will be able to help data teams be as productive and as impactful as possible, while also helping companies to deliver maximum value to their customers and also bring real innovation to the world. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Santiago to show you more specifics of how we do that within the Unravel platform.
Before we get into the product demo, I wanted to spend a few moments here to show why DevOps tools and best practices won't work for the modern DataOps teams. In the DevOps world, the developer actually has access to very sophisticated, mature IDEs like this one, where they can do things such as correlating a line of code to performance so they can understand where the bottlenecks are from that standpoint. Or they can actually go ahead and use performance platforms itself to make sure that, hey, how is this running at scale? And most importantly, where are my bottlenecks so that way I can go ahead and address this today. Folks on the modern data app side don't have this ability. The IDE platforms are rudimentary at best. And really the only way that they're going to solve performance challenges is really just through trial and error, rinse and repeat. When it comes for DataOps platform teams that are monitoring the ecosystem and ensuring that everything is up, they have things such as Datadog, which has a view on network, latency, OS level resources. Same thing from a Grafana perspective. And so this is another popular tool that DevOps teams face. And while DataOps teams have the same ability to connect into these dashboards and use them the same, it's not actually speaking the language that really resonates for them. And most importantly, will reduce or speed up that mean time to resolution. DataOps teams want to be spoken in the way of, is there any data skew? Where are my task imbalances? What's the configuration that I need to do for my data app to make sure that it's performing as well as balancing across a distributed environment for performance and efficient resources. Last but not least, let's talk about costs and cost governance. And this is actually true for both sides, DevOps and DataOps teams. You do have billing dashboards, KPIs from within the cloud platforms itself. But what you'll find is that they're very batch-oriented in nature, so not really real-time. And most importantly, not being able to drill into a specific user group, so on and so forth, right? Now, this stuff is important, especially in a consumption model, so that way we can understand trends. We can go ahead and forecast this, let alone do anything about it. Now, customers do try to do this from a manual perspective if they want to get into a very fine-grained view of where costs are going, but very, very manual at best. Folks will spend hours and hours just to get just a specific snapshot of where costs are. And obviously that's always changing over time. But most importantly, it's actually not providing any insights as to how can we actually ensure that we are being resourceful with our cloud consumption resources. Now, let me walk you through a day in the life of a DataOps team working with a platform that was built from the ground up to meet their specific needs. We'll start off with the developer. Now, when developers are submitting jobs such as a Spark job, they have a platform that is talking their language in terms of containers, tasks, resources, drivers, executors. If I wanted to go and understand things such as this is a slow job and stage, what was a particular line of code that relates to this slow running stage, and what was the stack trace here? This is all built into a platform that was specifically built for their wants and needs. But we even take this up a step further with Unravel. We have this analysis tab here that can proactively identify things such as bottlenecks. And so in this particular case, we can see most of the time had been spent on the driver. And so if I go to this resources tab, just to show as an example here, if I go in and actually see the driver here, we can actually see majority of the resources spent are on the driver, and not much work is done here on the executors here. So in the DataOps speak, this is something that would be more impactful, something that tools such as Datadog and Grafana won't speak this particular type of language. We also have things in terms of efficiency. And so in this particular case, we can actually see that the VMs in this particular case that were spun up for this job, I could have done this with a lower resource. So these standard D8 V3s, for example, have 32 gigs of memory, 8 cores. I could have easily have just run this one with a 32 gig memory 4-core box, thereby actually being more efficient with resources. when it comes to monitoring productionalized workflows, for example, Unravel is, again, built from the ground up for these type of use cases. What you're seeing here right now is a very simple workflow view where I have 2 runs here. Immediately at first glance here, I can actually see that in this particular case, this one ran for 2 minutes and 47 seconds. But here on my first run here, it actually ran for 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Why? So just from a visualization perspective, I can see that the previous run was much longer. And maybe I want to go ahead and drill in. And so the way that I'm going to be able to do this is actually click on this particular Spark application right here. And once I'm actually in here, we can actually see in this particular case, there's been a large idle time for the executors in this particular run. In fact, the executors had no tasks to run for 50.4% of the total executor time. So load imbalance, something with data skew itself. And so if I go in on this longest running stage here, actually go into, say, for example, this timeline tab here, we can now actually see that in this particular case, the driver was doing all of the work here and not distributing work across the executors. And so in this particular case, while the executors were used throughout the this particular Spark job itself, most of the time spent on the longest running stage was primarily on the driver. And that attributed to the reason why this particular instance run ran a lot longer than this one. So from an MTTR perspective, having a single pane of glass that gets all this information in one correlated view is very, very powerful in ensuring that productionalized pipelines are meeting the SLAs that are expected of them from the business. Last but not least, let's talk about cost. The way that we're going to show this here is from an Unravel perspective. And so this is our Databricks capabilities. And so we have a tab here specific on just costs here. Now here we can actually start seeing things from a trending perspective. And why this is powerful here, actually what you're seeing is that DBU's cost is very similar to a DBU perspective here. You can now start understanding, hey, how are my resource trends trending essentially? Is it static? Is it plateaued? Or it's rising, and how much is it rising? Is it exponentially linear? You can now start seeing this visually from this standpoint. Another view of seeing this is if I go ahead and click on this chargeback view here, and we can actually start seeing things such as DBU, cost, clusters from a user perspective, or we can look at things from a workspace perspective, or even if you have tags from all your vendors in terms of AWS, Azure, Google, we have the ability to do that as well. And being able to go ahead and see this becomes, again, very, very powerful to understand where is cost going, who are my most users that are taking up the most cost. And if I wanted to, say, for example, set up like a budget, we can go ahead and do that as well. And so here, what you're seeing here is I can go ahead and start creating budget. And so I can give this an get name. I can go ahead and specify my parameters here. So we'll track this by DBU over a monthly period. And then I can actually get very granular. I can do this on a user level, say, for example, and say maybe I want to track usage for this particular user for the next month over month. Looks like he didn't use any DBUs last month, but I can go ahead and just set a budget for the next few months here. And if I click it here, we can actually see this actually gets created. But if we look at some of the examples here below, where we have this warning example, where this particular user is already tracking at 50 DBUs. And just for the sake of this recording, we are about halfway through the month of August, and we already set our budget here for 70. And so based on current usages here, we expect the cost to exceed the projected budget before the next period date, which is November. And so we even show a forecasted cost based on current trends of 120.8 DBUs. And so this, again, becomes very powerful for folks that want to be more proactive in terms of when budgets are about to get exceeding, or even worse, let's just say budgets were already exceeded. And so in this particular case, this user had just went over the budget here, but did go over the budget itself, right? That was actually shown here and it's red. And so now folks that own the budget for this, we can not only get very detailed and fine-grained on how we want to set up budgets, but we also have the ability to even optimize. And so if I actually go ahead and click on optimize, it takes me into this compute tab here. And if I actually just go ahead and look at this efficiency tab here, and I have this very high level view of all the jobs that have inefficiencies. In this particular case, I'm trying to reduce my consumption so that I don't hit my budget ceiling. And so here are all the jobs that this particular user had submitted. If I go, say, for example, into this cluster, this Spark jobs more specifically, I've got that instance recommendation here that will help further give insights and recommendations on how can we actually tune these jobs with efficiency in mind, so that way we could not hit my forecasted budget. Hopefully, this gives you a good view of Unravel Data and why Unravel Data itself is an AI-enabled observability platform built for DataOps teams to address their specific wants and needs.